Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Kirby. I'm with the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, and I'm delighted to welcome you here to today's meeting of the Hydrogen Association. And, one moment, please. Apologies for that. My apologies. Again, Mark Kirby with the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. Delighted to welcome you here to today's webinar. I'm joined here by a very distinguished group of panelists who will be talking to you today about the whole development in the area of hubs. And this is an area of significant development around the world. It's been an exciting to see how this has progressed from the activity early starting in Europe with the hydrogen valleys. And this is being picked up now around the world with many countries looking to see how they can develop themselves the hydrogen hubs to help in establishing the hydrogen sector in their countries. It's generally widely recognized now that the benefits of starting to help to develop a hub where you can consolidate the production of hydrogen with multiple applications leads to many benefits, leads to lower cost, leads to scale, which brings the lower cost of hydrogen. And that in turn will stimulate new deployments, lead to investment in research, deployment of new technologies, development of skills, etc. So this is an area that is now being targeted in many countries, including in Canada, to see what we can do to stimulate and foster the development of hubs. One of the best ways to do this is to look at where are successful hubs happening today. And certainly the UK is an area that has many, but also here in Canada, we are starting to see some very promising hubs under development. The leading one being in Edmonton Heartland, but others close on their heels, including some of the groups we're going to be talking to today. So to start this off, what we're going to be joined with is a Canadian group to talk about what's happening here in Canada. One of the persons that has been probably the most influential in Canada in advancing the concept of hubs has been Dr. David Layzell from the University of Calgary, also works with the Transition Accelerator. And Dave has really pioneered the awareness of hubs and the importance of it, and has centered his activities on in the Edmonton area, where there is a confluence of hydrogen users today, and the opportunity to deploy clean hydrogen and other technologies. So Dr. Layzell will be starting out to begin with to talk a bit about his hub, the hub that's developing in the Edmonton Heartland, and to give some of the experience as to what's happening in that area. So I'd like now turn it over to Dr. Layzell and let you go ahead and give a bit of a summary of that exciting development.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to share my screen if I can, and I think this should come up. What I would like to do is talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing to create a fuel hydrogen economy in Alberta, and really focused on the Edmonton region. Hydrogen is a major, or Alberta is a major center for hydrogen production today. It produces about 5,400 tons of hydrogen every day, which is 2/3 of the Canadian production. And when you consider that Alberta is only about 12% of the Canadian population, that's a significant emphasis of hydrogen production within this one province. The hydrogen is being used as an industrial feedstock for fertilizer production, and for oil upgrading and refining, and for chemical material production. Of course, much of the hydrogen today is gray hydrogen. It's made from natural gas. And it comes in under $1 a kilogram with natural gas prices the way they are today. But there's been a significant advances in the movement towards blue hydrogen, where the carbon dioxide is captured from the production process, from the methane reforming, and sequestered geologically. And that can be done at a price of about $1.60 a kilogram. And to remind people, $1 Canadian, and I'm talking Canadian dollars here, are about 80 cents American dollars, 80 cents. Now, I want to focus on one area here that Mark mentioned, and it's around the capital of Alberta, which is Edmonton. And the city of Edmonton, just to the northeast of it, is a major hydrogen corridor. There's a 50-kilometer long hydrogen pipeline and 2 carbon dioxide pipelines that have been built in the last 10 years. And the hydrogen is produced, the CO2 is captured from 3 plants up here. We'll zoom in on this a little bit more closely. In this area of just in this region itself, there's over 2,000 tons of hydrogen being produced per day. It's being used there as well, of course, as an industrial feedstock. And these facilities up in the right up here are actually producing blue hydrogen. There's Northwest Redwater, it's an upgrader, a Scotford upgrader, and a fertilizer plant. And the CO2 is being put into either the enhanced oil recovery line or the Quest CO2 pipeline. Now, in the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months, there's been a number of announcements of new blue hydrogen facilities that are actually being built with autothermal reforming and where you're actually capturing about 95% of the CO2. And there's one is by Suncor and ATCO. It's going to be built down in this region. There's another one by Air Products is going to be built down in this region as well. And these are going to add perhaps another 2,000 tons of hydrogen a day of production. Now, of course, the challenge when we actually look at moving into a fuel hydrogen system is we have a significant challenge because we have to create a whole new value chain. And so one of the things that we've been noticing in our analysis is that the real challenge of getting to scale to make it economically viable. So we don't have to rely ongoing on public support. To be economically viable and deliver hydrogen at a oops, I somehow have dropped off here. Deliver hydrogen at a reasonable price, the hydrogen fueling station must be at least 2 to 10 tons of hydrogen per day. So we need to about 40 to 200 heavy duty trucks or 100 to 500 buses for every station we deploy. And that's quite a challenge, as you can imagine. Now, while hydrogen fuel cell electric trucks are clearly the vehicle of choice because of their efficiencies and the low maintenance costs, et cetera. Hydrogen dual fuel vehicles in our analysis can help us get to scale quickly with minimum risk to the carriers, because there's a real, not only are these vehicles very hard to find today in the heavy vehicle sector, but certainly there's a concern that if they run out of fuel, they basically don't go anywhere, whereas a hydrogen diesel dual fuel vehicles can actually help to create this hydrogen economy. But if they can't get access to fuel, these vehicles just become diesel vehicles again. So that's part of our analysis of how we're trying to build a hydrogen economy here. Next is important to look at the distribution and delivery of the hydrogen. We have a centralized production of blue hydrogen as a feedstock. We can also make green hydrogen in the province, especially more southern parts of the province. But the truck transport of hydrogen to the hydrogen filling stations is very expensive. Ideally, hydrogen pipelines should be built. But if we want to keep the cost down below $1 per kilogram of hydrogen to get it delivered from where it's being produced to the fueling station, we need a flow of about 1 ton of hydrogen per day for each kilometer traveled. So if we wanted to move it 100 kilometers, we're going to need demand of 100 tons of hydrogen a day. And certainly we've been looking at not only the fueling station demands, but heat and power demands, and possibly even export demands to other communities and other provinces, United States and overseas. And that will help us to get to the scale that we need. Well, blue and green hydrogen is more expensive than natural gas. In most of Canada, it is our analysis of others has suggested that hydrogen is probably the best solution for space heating in a net zero energy future. And this demand could really help to support the infrastructure investments that we're building into our strategy. One other point here is that blue hydrogen production emissions of less than 1 kilogram of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen is essential, and that would give us overall life cycle emissions about 3. The methane, upstream methane emissions are coming down dramatically, and then with new laws in the next few years, we're hoping to drop this, considerably. And certainly this we can easily meet that target with some new technologies. Local hydrogen production from renewables could minimize transportation costs, but the real challenge here is we got to keep electricity costs low to get hydrogen to the marketplace. So our overall strategy is to piggyback on the low-cost industrial blue hydrogen production, pipeline hydrogen to new fuel markets, rapidly grow the demand in those markets, and also attract hydrogen using industries. And while there may be a role for liquid hydrogen in distribution, we see this as one for building new station and new demands, and trying to expand the infrastructure support. Certainly a role, but hopefully not in the central. I'm just going to identify some of the projects we have going or working on now. A major heavy duty truck project. These are 63.5 metric ton gross vehicle weight trucks that are, 2 of them are being built. They're going to be running about a year from now, the Edmonton to Calgary corridor. They're hydrogen fuel cell electric trucks. And this is a project with Ballard and Suncor and Dyna Transport. There's an ATCO project in Fort Saskatchewan to put hydrogen into natural gas pipelines at about 5% blend and eventually increasing. There's a CP rail project. They're building a hydrogen fuel cell trains. We're working on applications for hydrogen fuel cell transit bus projects. And there's projects for new ways of making hydrogen through natural gas. We're also working on a project with hydrogen diesel dual fuel technologies and various types of trucks and even heavy haulers that are off-grid, off-road, and working on a project with to work with existing truck companies selling hydrogen trucks to provide the users with hands-on experience so that we can, hopefully successful companies will buy these trucks and support the fueling infrastructure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today.
Thanks for the quick overview, Dave, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions we can have about that. And I'm particularly interested, the how it's obviously working. You can see that there are projects now being attracted to the Edmonton area, and which, to the minds of municipalities and politicians, that's investment that's flowing in there, and it's meaningful GHG reductions that are being produced out of that. So I think it's it is showing the impact that hubs can have. But Edmonton is certainly not the only location in Canada that's working to develop hubs. One of the early areas of hydrogen activity in Canada, actually, it's got several decades of experience in this, is Quebec, and particularly in Bécancour area, where there is an existing major liquid hydrogen plant, recently been expanded, that has been supplying hydrogen into the North American market for literally decades. That is now an opportunity and for a hub in that area. And 2 individuals that are very closely involved in that are Simon Barnabé from the Hydrogen Research Institute at the University of Quebec at Trois-Rivières, and also part of the Bécancour Innovation Zone, and Bruno Paulet, who's Deputy Director of the University of Quebec at Trois-Rivières Research Hydrogen Institute. And they are going to be here to talk about what's going on at Bécancour. So I'll turn it over to Simon and Bruno.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. I am very happy to be with you today to speak about this Bécancour Innovation Zone project. First of all, let me describe you about, just wait. Okay, the Bécancour Trois-Rivières Innovation Zone is part of a broad initiative from the Quebec government, who launched a call of projects for innovation zone proposals. And in fact, Quebec wants its own Silicon Valleys. It is a bit similar to super cluster programs that we can see in many countries, but for the Quebec case, a city must be the carrier of the project. Let's talk now about the city of Bécancour. Bécancour has the biggest industrial park in Quebec with its world-class industrial port zone. There is also presence of heavy industry, especially from the chemical and the metallurgy sectors. And by the way, this park is under the jurisdiction, the management of the government of Quebec. And as you may know, a new 20 megawatt PEM electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen is under operation on the Air Liquide side. There's an Air Liquide plant there. And with many CO2 producers from the EV industry and the hydrogen producing plant that we have actually on the site, it sounds like a perfect experimental site for decarbonization of the EV industry and port activity with hydrogen uses and CO2 valorization. It has a potential to become a central role in a green hydrogen hub. So it is why the city of Bécancour and the local stakeholders has proposed an innovation zone project that focus on decarbonization of the EV industry and port activity. The city of Trois-Rivières, that is just on the other side of the St. Lawrence River, recently joins the party because they have many urban decarbonization projects involving new hydrogen users. This innovation zone project has three main research and innovation axes: the hydrogen production, storage, distribution, and uses under perspective of assembling a green hydrogen value chain. It is also about capture and CO2 valorization by attracting technology provider. And we want also to help the battery sector of Quebec to get to its full maturity. The Bécancour Industrial Park can count on major industrial partners who form a promising industry and academia clusters. We have local companies like the chemical industry, Alliance, Cepsa, Orkney, Air Liquide. We have also a strong metallurgy sector with ABI, Aluminerie Bécancour, Canada Oil, Celestion Quebec. Note is the zone project is supported by local stakeholders who help us to facilitate the partnership development, attract new business in the zone, achieve social acceptability. We have an interesting chain of innovation here with university and the research center, as well as many technological transfer center. You know, university and technology transfer center contribute not only to the knowledge development and transfer, but also to the training, especially when we talk about hydrogen technology integration. We have many other partners, including Cummins, Energy, Hydro-Québec, and we have more and more international relations. And we are beginning to attract some interesting company. And to be more efficient and connect our new zone community, we plan to have an innovation center to welcome private labs and pilot test bench. Coming back to our hydrogen vision, we want to build the Quebec green hydrogen value chains, especially the development of a value chain for the manufacture of electrolyzer, with the idea to become not only a green hydrogen hub, but also some kind of gigafactory. And for this, we have recruited Professor Bruno Paulette, who is the holder of our hydrogen vision. Professor Paulette is a worldwide renowned specialist in green hydrogen production. We have succeeded to seduce him and attract him to Canada, and he's now a University of Quebec Trois-Rivières researcher at the Hydrogen Research Institute. I don't know if he's there. I know that he will come back for the question part. So we will let him have a little chat there. And that is so. Just to speak you rapidly about what this concept of gigafactory, that's the place where we want to build electrolyzer fuel cell, where we want to make encourage the local manufacturing companies to manufacture pieces for electrolyzers, pieces for fuel cell, a lot of accessories around that. We want to have this chain of value related to the manufacture of electrolyzers. So that's really what we would like to do in that zone. So I will complete like this. Bécancour and Trois-Rivières, as you can see on the photo, we are very close, and we are ready to become a green hydrogen hub. International relations are very important for any innovation zone in Quebec, even Canada. So UK-Canada hydrogen project must rise. Good, thank you.
Thanks very much, Simon. And again, fascinating to see the developments that are happening there. And I thought it was particularly interesting that you're not only seeing the investments and the economic activity downstream from the hydrogen, but also now looking to get involved in the value chain of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies in the electrolyzer end of it. So, looking to really develop that full ecosystem of the hydrogen and fuel cell value chain. The next speakers we have are another Quebec group that is working a little further south in the town of Varennes, which is part of the Greater Montreal area. And in that area, one of the more exciting hydrogen-related announcements that happened recently was the $900 million announcement of an investment by ENERKEM in the construction of a large world-class biofuels plant there. And as part of that, an 88 megawatt electrolyzer to be built by Hydro-Quebec. And so certainly a significant part of the investments that are happening in the hydrogen space and clean fuel space globally. And to speak a little bit about that and how it can be also part of a hydrogen hub, we have Alex Miles, who's the project lead with ENERKEM, based in the UK and looking after the Varennes Innovation Hub. And I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
Mark, thank you very much for that introduction. Just to clarify, I work for a Canadian company, but I'm based here in London, so I'm on, if you like, on both sides of the equation for this session. But I'm here to talk about ENERKEM. We've heard so far about the production of hydrogen involving carbon capture, blue hydrogen, if you like, and in the last presentation, a little bit about electrolysis and green hydrogen. Key difference for ENERKEM is that we're a company focused on alternative feedstocks, namely non-recycled or unrecycled waste streams. And we can use that as either as a feedstock with which, together with hydrogen, we can make new sustainable products, or indeed to actually produce hydrogen. So the title of this presentation is around hydrogen, both use and production. So just to focus shortly on ENERKEM, we've developed a thermochemical gasification platform with a key theme around flexibility. It's a flexible feedstock flexible process, as I said, focused on waste. But essentially, we can process quite a wide range of carbon-containing waste, and it's that flexibility that enables us to address quite a large, substantial part of the unrecycled waste market. Downstream, we produce initially a syngas, and from that, we then produce alcohols. These are initial products. From these platforms, we can go to a whole different range of sustainable chemicals and fuels. And you see in the final column here some of the examples of some of the products that we can process. Overall, the company's been around for around 21 years, and we've developed this right from lab through to commercial scale facilities. You can see here a short timeline, starting in Sherbrooke, moving to a demonstration plant in Westbury, and then developing a commercial demonstration facility also in Edmonton, so the same location as the first speaker. And from here, we're now expanding across North America and Europe with commercial scale schemes. With a technology level, readiness level of around 8 to 9, 9 for syngas and for methanol, and maybe a touch earlier still for the ethanol product. Talk about waste. As I mentioned, it's unrecycled waste, so it's the reject fraction, if you like, from existing recycling plants. We're not looking to compete with other recycling processes. And typically, these wastes fall into two different categories. They are either biomass, composed mainly of biogenic carbon, or plastics from fossil carbon. Typically, they're in the middle, a mixed waste stream, which can be hard to separate and typically contain things like low-grade plastics, food waste, and residual waste streams that have not been cannot be economically separated. Our range is between those two boundaries, so we can handle both. And as I say, very much focused on the rejects rather than competing with the existing recycling processes. In terms of our latest announcement, referenced by Mark at the beginning there, we've recently closed, at the beginning of this year, in fact, the Varennes carbon recycling project, which comprises an ENERKEM biorefinery, which will produce alcohols and fuels from various different waste streams, together with a large-scale electrolyzer, 87 megawatt electrolyzer, which is being developed by Hydro-Quebec. It's a unique project in the sense that it combines the two projects together. So if you like, it's the start perhaps of a hub or a cluster. And the reason we do this is that it enables us to maximize the production and the environmental performance of our technology. How does it do that? Well, quick block flow diagram, just to give you a rough idea. We receive the feedstock into our facility, which we then gasify to create a syngas. This is then cleaned to a petrochemical grade syngas, which is suitable for methanol synthesis and other downstream chemical processes. Together with the electrolyzer, however, by taking both the oxygen and the hydrogen generated by the electrolyzer, we can double the production. And this means that over 70% of the carbon in the waste is being captured in the products that we produce from our facility. In this way, this project is, if you like, an enabler of the hydrogen economy. We are a large-scale customer who have a steady-state, continuous demand for hydrogen, and that demand facilitates the development of hydrogen production capacity. And in this case, that is electrolysis in Quebec, delivered by Hydro-Quebec. However, an alternative business model alluded to at the start is that we can also look to produce hydrogen via our platform. The syngas that we produce is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. And by shifting that carbon monoxide to hydrogen, we can focus our production on hydrogen itself, leaving CO2 for carbon capture and storage to, again, maximize the environmental performance. This is a newish model. I have to say the company today has been focused mainly on maximizing carbon conversion, but with the increasing interest in hydrogen and incentives being offered now for hydrogen as either a fuel or as a consumable in other processes, this is a business model that we're now starting to develop more readily, particularly in locations where perhaps electrolysis is not a favored production pathway. Finally, on that last business model, though, a couple of challenges. Producing hydrogen this way tends to be relatively expensive, so you have higher production costs. The infrastructure, we saw earlier in some of the presentations, some of the initiatives that are starting now, but we don't yet have, as we say, mass take-up of hydrogen as a transportation fuel and the infrastructure to support that. So that's a limiting factor. And then finally, a strategy around carbon. As I mentioned, our strategy to date has been focused on carbon conversion into product. And if we follow a hydrogen production pathway, we end up with CO2 as a byproduct. So some questions there as to how we reuse and recapture that carbon in other forms to, again, make sure that we are recovering carbon and delivering on the low carbon economy. Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex, much appreciate that. And again, interesting take on a hub, at least I guess the nexus of a hub, a potential nexus of a hub that which is an opportunity now to build around. I'd ask this point if Dave and Miles could rejoin me at this, or Simon, pardon me, could rejoin at this point. There you are. And there you are. Okay, so I want to get a little discussion going here. And we've got some questions that have already come in from the audience. But I would like to start off by why are your locations the right places for hydrogen hubs, and what you know, is there something unique about what you are? You're obviously centered around industrial activity. Is that the only place to have a hydrogen hub? What are some of the considerations in somebody saying, you know, gee, I'd like to be a hydrogen hub too? What are some of the considerations that that need to be taken into account? And I'll start with Dave, since I know you've done some thought on this area.
No, that's a great question. I think in our analysis, you know, there's a lot of places across Canada that and around the world, of course, where hydrogen hubs would make sense. There are some companies that actually produce hydrogen as a byproduct, like they're making sodium hydroxide and they've got waste hydrogen. There's a significant opportunity there to build a demand around those places. There are other places that have, I mean, in Quebec, in certain pockets, and Ontario, near the nuclear power stations, et cetera, and they often have surplus electricity and fantastic opportunity to make hydrogen and start creating a new value chain there. And there's some places where there's just a real need for hydrogen. For example, in Hamilton, there's a steel, you know, there's an interest in decarbonizing steel and moving to direct reduction of iron and eventually to hydrogen in steel making is, you know, opens up new market opportunities for the steel industry. And so in which case they don't have an obvious great source of hydrogen nearby, but they have a significant enough demand that one could actually possibly build the hydrogen supply to meet the demand. And I think you can either start with the demand or you can start with the supply. If you're starting with demand, you got to make sure that the companies that are engaged are going to be willing to pay a little extra for their energy, at least at this stage. So
Thanks, Dave. Simon, do you want to add to that in terms of why Varennes, and is it unique, or is there other considerations people need to take into account?
No, but it's sure in our case, because we had some green hydrogen production on site, it was logical to try to build the ecosystem around that, because there's already hydrogen users in that park. So we have already some potential hydrogen users. And I think that maybe one important aspect to build such a hydrogen hub is maybe to be near of port activity. Okay, port can be around the world are a very good place where we see success story about integrating hydrogen technology. So we have to be near of such place to facilitate the integration of hydrogen technology and then spread it on their territory after. So based on our experience, having port activity around our new hydrogen ecosystem is very important.
What is special about a port? What are some of the things that a port brings into play that
it is about the mobile port equipment, reach stalker, stuff like this. But they are not easy to convert, but they are convertible to hydrogen. Okay, there's a lot of success story around the world related to that, and we believe that these hydrogen users is good to begin, to integrate hydrogen technology in the area and sensibilize everybody else about the safety use of the hydrogen, okay, and also about what it takes really to operate such equipment based on hydrogen.
I've heard, and we talked about the potential that building some of the demand with, as you say, some of the material handling or some of the truck traffic, something coming to port, may allow you to build up that capacity for eventually helping to convert the larger demand, such as offshore shipping and things like that. Is that sort of a progression that
yes, it is exactly a progression, and we have to begin with small users, and after we can think bigger.
Okay. And Alex, in your point of view, coming from the other side as a private sector company, you have obviously built a business case for your demand for hydrogen. You've got a plant that's sized to meet your needs. You have a customer. You are the customer for that. What is your interest in as a private sector company and a user in turning yourself into maybe a hub with some other applications tied into it? Where do you see the benefits to your operations?
Well, as you rightly note, Mark, we are the demand, or our project is the demand. So we mainly focus on the supply side of things, and Quebec is a great location for the supply of low cost and green hydrogen. And those two elements are both important. We picking up also on Simone's point around ports. The key thing is low production costs. We want to minimize our production costs so that we can be as cost competitive as possible, and that comes in the form of low consumer pricing, such as lower cost hydrogen, but also in some of the synergies you can secure in industrial locations by combining your operations with other facilities who bring benefits. And the green element is important to us because ultimately that maximizes the environmental performance associated with our plant and if you like, lowers the carbon intensity of our products. And that has a direct correlation with value in a number of markets at the moment. So for us, it's really about low cost and green and locating in Varennes and the electrolyzer there and securing participation by Hydro-Quebec and the green electricity. It delivered on those goals, and I think it can be as you say, the start of a cluster that could grow. Because as I say, I think there's mutual benefits from other plants like co-locating where we can achieve some further synergies and benefits.
And so thanks. That helps in understanding some of the drives for getting to having a hub in your location. Let's talk about hydrogen supply a little bit. And you've mentioned that in Quebec you have the hydropower there that allows you to get the hydrogen at a cost competitive rate. And I assume that applies in Bécancour as well. Dave, in your case, it's looking at the fossil fuel resources and capitalizing on that. Can you comment on Dave, is there thoughts being given to shifting from blue to green? Is there, what would be the the views on that whole debate of whether you get your clean hydrogen from a fossil fuel resource or your clean hydrogen from a renewable resource?
I think it's going to be both. When you actually look at the Canadian hydrogen strategy, and I know, Mark, you are well familiar with it, it came out for those on the call here on this from the UK. It's I think it's major strategy that came out in December of last year. The scale of projected scale of hydrogen demand in Canada is quite large, and I think we're going to need both. We're going to need to maximize both our green and blue resources. The way I look at it right now is the early stage deployment might be more focused on, with large pipelines and the infrastructure, more focused on blue, but green will play a very important role in helping to build out demand for hydrogen across Canada, because you can make green hydrogen many different places. Blue hydrogen, you're better constrained. You have to be in a place where you can sequester the CO2, right? In order to, you have to handle your waste product. And so you're constrained there. But I could see a pipeline infrastructure and other infrastructure building out more on the basis of blue, but then shifting more and more to green as sequestration locations become more challenging. Usually we start to use up our carbon sequestration, but also as the price of renewables and electrolyzers come down and the scale gets up, then we can actually start to compete on an economic basis. So I'm not convinced it's a one or the other. It's both, and we're going to need all of the above, and we're going to need to just have a very much a regional flavor. Some areas it'll be green, some areas will be blue.
Alex, from your point of view as a a user of hydrogen and a potential producer of hydrogen, would ENERKEM be open to the idea of using blue hydrogen or hydrogen, clean hydrogen from a fossil resource as part of your process, or do you see it more that you would be displacing that hydrogen at some point?
Well, it's a bit of both, and I agree really with David about the need for both and the importance perhaps of maybe blue hydrogen as a means to getting hydrogen economy started, and perhaps green when the costs become more reasonable, being, if you like, the production method that we hand over to, perhaps, hopefully in future. We have blue hydrogen supply as part of our projects in Europe at the moment. There are extensive carbon capture schemes planned. We actively and keep a keen eye on the green hydrogen market and opportunity, but it is a bit on the expensive side at the minute. In most locations, Quebec is unique in its low-cost environment, and there are some comparators in Europe, but in a number of markets, it's still a little bit too expensive to really make economic sense at the moment. But that will change. And in the blue hydrogen case, I think with the growth, large-scale CCS projects in a number of locations, particularly here in Europe as well, I see a strong future for blue hydrogen. And let's be clear, the reduction in carbon intensity that comes with blue hydrogen versus grey hydrogen is significant. I mean, it's a significant step. And then it's another step again to green. So I don't see us magically jumping from grey to green. A bit like in the power market and other markets, there's typically a period of transition, and hopefully we can transition relatively quickly. But I see markets for both those forms of hydrogen. And let's not forget yellow and turquoise and all the other colours under the rainbow that I'm seeing in the questions.
The rainbow hydrogen.
I personally think of it as you have really clean hydrogen. You have many sources you can get it from. It's confusing to talk about colors, and for that reason, we really need to be thinking about carbon intensity, because of course, when you talk even blue hydrogen, it can have a vast range of carbon intensities depending on what technologies are used. And also, hydrogen from renewable sources can potentially have a range in carbon intensities. So what do you think is needed to help for companies that are areas that are considering putting in place a hub and they're looking to evaluate their hydrogen sources? What is needed so that they can really access all the different types of hydrogen, or consider all the different types of hydrogen? Is it okay to consider using fossil fuels right now? What's needed to make sure that there's public acceptance of that, whether that's regulation or other? And I'll turn that to Simon.
Yes, I want to talk about that, because I think that yes, we can use gray and blue hydrogen. The most important thing is to help for hydrogen technology integration. Okay, and that's very important. So we can begin with gray and blue, and later it will be green. We have to prepare our part to handle hydrogen, to ship hydrogen. We shall not wait for green hydrogen. We shall prepare everything, all these new users to hydrogen technology integration, which include all the safety aspect, regulation aspect. We have to demonstrate that it is not very complicated. Okay, it is possible to have hydrogen in our area and use it.
Okay, so it's more a matter of we need to get moving on hydrogen. And yes, we need to work on improving our hydrogen supply, but we really just need to get moving on getting hydrogen.
Yes, that is, yes.
All right. Would you? I'm seeing nods coming from Alex and David on that one. Is that
maybe one more comment? And I think what Simon just said was really important. But I think there's also a really interesting opportunity with the ENERKEM technology. If you think about it, one of the products that they produce is CO2 because they're taking biomass feedstocks and maybe plastics and making it into hydrogen in one of their technologies. There's a real opportunity to piggyback on the CO2 pipeline network that will be handling carbon from fossil fuel resources. And when you think about it in Canada, our agricultural districts, where we produce a lot of carbon every year and a huge amount of waste carbon that could actually be converted, into energy products, they happen to be on the sedimentary basins, the same sedimentary basins where we have our oil and gas reserve. It's Western Canada, it's Southwestern Ontario. That is the best agricultural districts in the country. And so there's an alignment between our agricultural districts and our districts where there's probably going to be carbon sequestration potential. So some of the modeling what we've been doing and analysis is to say, look, there's a possibility to integrate sort of biomass to hydrogen, sequester the CO2, and you can get negative carbon hydrogen emissions. And I think that's actually quite exciting. And that sort of carbon emissions, and we're quite interested in trying to move forward some of these things. You would never build a CO2 pipeline for a biomass CO2 supply. It's just not big enough. But if you're sitting right beside a pipeline that's being built for fossil fuel carbon sequestration, there's an opportunity of benefiting from that. And it creates some really quite interesting opportunities for waste to hydrogen production with negative carbon emission hydrogen.
And all this calls for being able to track and monitor the carbon intensity of whatever production pathway you've got. And I would say we could probably talk about that as terms of the regulatory and certification needs to be able to say that the hydrogen is of this carbon intensity or negative carbon intensity, and then a value to that. Which looking at your case, Dave, it's 3 kilograms of CO2 you mentioned per ton of hydrogen taken all in. That could have a significant cost to it if it went forward. If you look at clean fuel standards and things like that.
Yeah, I guess the gray hydrogen's probably around 12 or 10, 11 or 12 right now for gray hydrogen production, like life cycle I'm talking, the whole upstream and everything. Dropping it to 3 is benefit, but actually dropping it to a negative number would knock it out of the park. So, I think that's one of the things we need to be looking at. And I think there's actually, I can tell you there's a lot of researchers that I know that are actually trying to figure out how to do that. So
cool. All right. So that's talking a bit about the hydrogen supply. Now let's just talk about, in one area I didn't touch on, you are all industrial locations and you're all, centered around industrial complexes. Is that the only place for a hydrogen hub? Can you have it in a rural area? And I'm quite conscious that some of the speakers in the next group include the Orkney Islands. So, how do you is there value in starting to look at hubs if you're a remote community or perhaps a smaller center? And I'll start here, I guess with, I'll talk with David again. You start getting underway.
Well, one of the things we've been looking at is and we haven't really talked about it, but as part of the hydrogen economy is ammonia. And because you make ammonia from hydrogen, and you can make blue ammonia, and then we're already doing it in one of the, not we, but some of the companies within the Edmonton region are already making a blue ammonia. The possibility, a lot of interest in blue ammonia for export to Asia, but also an interest in blue ammonia as an alternative for remote communities and as a way of actually storing. You can do long-term storage much more easily of hydrogen and chemical storage, and you can actually convert the ammonia back into heat and electricity. You can actually convert it back into hydrogen. And so we've got a number of groups looking at the feasibility of an integrating sort of ammonia into the overall hydrogen strategy, especially for remote and off communities. There's a lot of those in Canada, and they have a lot of heat demand because they tend to be in Canada, and we're cold. So, yeah,
I'm conscious that I'm supposed to be going to break pretty soon here. So I'm just going to ask one question, which we should have got to before, is what does somebody do if they want to start thinking about getting a hydrogen hub in place? And I'll start with Simon about this. What should a group or an area think about doing as the first step?
I think we have to gather the local stakeholder, the people on the place. That's the most important thing. Okay, we should not surprise citizens with surprising hydrogen technology. We have to involve them as soon as possible, and the best way is to involve the city stakeholders. And when you got them, when you convince them, normally the rest is going very well.
Okay. And Alex, you have any thoughts on what people need to do to start getting a hub underway?
I agree that it needs to be a collaborative effort. I don't think you're going to force a transition as a single company on its own. So you can see from our Varennes project that we work with a wide range of stakeholders. I would encourage locations to focus on an assessment of why location X versus location Y, because I'll come back to the production cost. The business case is important. You need to optimize, you need to make sure that there's a competitive advantage or a reason why you're putting a hydrogen plant in a certain location. For example, if we pursued our project in Varennes, just up the road in Nova Scotia, there you've got predominantly fossil-based power generation. The carbon intensity of our product would be that much worse, and that would disadvantage a business case. And then coming back to Simon's earlier point, collaborate, co-locating, benefiting each other, securing those synergies. Those are all important elements. And in our particular case as well, feedstock is important. So we have, to an island community, they'll generate some waste. It's probably not going to be enough waste for one of the facilities at a scale that we currently build. So, you have to look at the different options you have for hydrogen production, see which could work for you, and then build it around that. But it needs to be, business case, carbon intensity. These are key things to assess, to see that you've got something that holds together and it's going to remain competitive, because the downstream markets for these products, some of them are quite well supported by regulations at the moment, but regulations aren't meant to be permanent. They're meant to bring forward these new production pathways, but ultimately the competitiveness of your facility and how low your production costs are will determine how successful and viable your location will be as not only a hydrogen hub, but as a cluster of companies as a whole. Because that clustering is increasingly critical to remaining cost competitive in the world at the moment.
Thanks, Alex. And last words, Dave, to you in terms of what should somebody be thinking about doing? I know you guys at the Transition Accelerator are doing a lot of work to get hubs underway. So,
well, I would agree with the previous statements about the importance of finding low-cost supply, but it's also about demand as well. And I think that there's constantly a supply. We're trying to create a new value chain. The approach that we've been using, and as we look at hubs in different parts of Canada, is to do what we call foundation reports. And these are basically detailed studies on what's the current energy system that exists in a particular region. Are there any companies making hydrogen already? Is there spare or low-cost electricity? What times a day? How much is there? And is there a coalition of the willing? Alex talked about getting the companies together. Can you get companies that are willing to spend time on this, right? And do you have a coalition of willing to do it? And these foundation reports, they become fairly detailed, doing a regional analysis of what's the cost benefits and trade-offs, and what are the opportunities. And our work that we've done suggests that every time you pick a new community, you basically find out there's different mix of things. And the hydrogen economy, the hydrogen hub that you would build there is very different than you would build 100 kilometers away. And I think it's looking, the waste, who are the companies? What resources do they have? What, what opportunities do they have to actually take us in that right direction? And is there somebody there who wants to, economic development agencies and companies that want to play the game? And that's what matters.
Thanks very much, all gentlemen. With that, I think we're drawing to the past our time when we're supposed to be taking a break. But I will ask you not to go away because there's some additional questions that are on the list here, which I didn't have time to get to, that we will probably want to tackle as a group following the talks from the UK panelists. Things such as turquoise hydrogen and major applications and lots of good stuff to talk about. So we're taking a break now, but I will ask that we not extend that too long. I'd like to try and get things back underway at or shortly after 11 o'clock. So do please rejoin us, go grab a coffee, and we'll talk to you again soon. So Alex and Dave, you're still there? Good. And is the moderator there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm not sure though. Yeah, maybe go into the chat.
Okay. And I believe we're now back. So we are now moving from the discussion of the Canadian hydrogen hubs to discussion of the UK. And this is very exciting for me because, of course, I'm somewhat familiar with what's going on in Canada, but I am much less familiar with what's going on in the UK, and I'm very eager to hear more. We know that the UK has been leading in this area. They've got some, as demonstrated by the list of speakers here, they have got some significant activity underway in hydrogen hubs, and I am personally really excited to hear about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they're tackling some of those challenging issues about hydrogen supply, about community engagement, and about building the demand for these. So we will start today with a discussion, and Mr. Mike Whiteley, Whiteley, head of Hydrogen Transport Hub, the Department of Transport for T Valley Hydrogen Transport Hub. And Mike, please do go ahead.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Mike Whiteley. I'm from the Department for Transport here in the UK, and I work in the Office for Science on a project called Tees Valley Hydrogen Transport Hub, which is the first in the UK for a transport hub based on hydrogen. So there's two parts of what I wanted to talk about today. So one part is what is the overall DFT picture for what we're doing with hydrogen transport, and then more specifically what we're doing with the hub. So recently, we've had a few policy announcements. So the Prime Minister's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution touched upon the importance of hydrogen, specifically with transport as well. The hydrogen strategy, which has been more recently published, has mentioned the importance of hydrogen. And also, there's, in terms of what funding we've allocated, there's £240 million for the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, which is looking at kickstarting production at scale in the UK. So we've set some targets for a twin track approach. So there's blue hydrogen and green hydrogen that's of interest. And that net zero fund is an incentive for industry to bid into to achieve those scales. Some of the quotes from these documents. So hydrogen is likely to be fundamental to achieving net zero in transport. So the UK government has made it clear that hydrogen for the transport sector is something that's fundamental. And also this other document here, which is the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, which again was published this year. And that's looking at how specifically the Department for Transport is looking at decarbonising the sector, but it's also got some sections in there on hydrogen in specifics. So projects, in terms of what projects the UK government have got going, listed here are some acronyms. We love acronyms. So technology agnostic programs are the ones above the line here. So ZERFT for the freight guys. So in the freight team, there's the zero emission road freight trials. So £20 million funding this year has gone into design of trials and trials for decarbonising freight. And this is where they're looking at trying to find the best technology to suit those applications. So they're looking at battery trucks, catenary trucks, and fuel cell trucks. For the marine sector, we're looking at the Clean Maritime Demonstration Competition. Again, this year it had 23 million. And this is looking at, again, feasibility studies and design of trials and some on the ground activity to look at hydrogen's role in decarbonising that sector, but also battery technologies and ammonia as an energy carrier, as a hydrogen carrier. In terms of passenger cars, the hydrogen transport programme was again £23 million, and that was looking at seeding passenger car, fuel cell cars on the roads, but also some hydrogen refueling infrastructure. And the majority of these stations that we put in were kind of a decentralized production facility, so that the electrolysis happened in a container, as a containerized solution, and offered access points for not only passenger cars, but buses and trucks too. In terms of buses, there's the Zebra program, which is the zero emission bus regional areas, I believe. That had a bit more funding, and this is trying to reach our goal of decarbonising buses, and this is through batteries or fuel cells. So they're all technology agnostic, not specifically hydrogen programs, but may contain some hydrogen activity, whereas the Tees Valley Hydrogen Hub is very geographically anchored and also specific to the hydrogen sector. So in terms of the project and the background behind it, so for the previous spending review, which was for 2021 to 22, we secured £3 million of funding to kickstart the competition and the project. And the problem is, so the issue we were trying to address is, we know that hydrogen is likely to be fundamental for decarbonising transport, and we've made that clear in the policy documents recently. The UK has strengths and expertise along the whole hydrogen value chain. So specific for the Tees Valley area, 50% of UK's hydrogen is produced in the Tees Valley area currently, because there's a lot of chemical industry in the area. But also we need to understand, so that what's the viability of hydrogen transport against other solutions? We need to compare them on a level playing field. So what we're trying to do is apply the economies of scale to this situation and try and seed supply and demand at the same time to the right scale, where we can actually see the viability of this and try and break through this market failure. So we've published a master plan that's online that everyone can see, and it shows what we're trying to achieve by 2050 for net zero targets. So feel free to have a look at that. But in terms of what we've tried to achieve this year with the money that we've been allocated, was running an R&D innovation competition. So through our partners Innovate UK, we're allocated £2.6 million towards these research development and demonstration projects. And some of the winners that I've kind of put here, this is not all of them, but a selection of them. We've got projects that are looking at on the ground trials this year of 19-ton freight vehicles, 44-ton trucks, light commercial vans, food delivery vans, a fleet of passenger cars, a few buses, a marine vessel, and some forklifts. So the whole point of this competition is to seed demand, get people working in the area, starting to put in some infrastructure. So we've got some green infrastructure in place in the form of mobile refueling. And this is to kind of seed the project and kind of support the project in the hydrogen demand, but also build interest in developing that further for when we develop the project. In terms of how we develop the project, it's still kind of to be confirmed. We've obviously going through the spending review process now in the UK. And once we know the outcome of that settlement for the hub, we can look into how we develop it further. So we're using the learning from the trials we have in place now. What kind of policy issues we're coming across? What is industry interested in developing further? What's the Tees Valley Combined Authority wanting to achieve? And how can we take that to the next level? And initially, we're thinking of having a skills and development piece around a hub institute, so kind of upskilling the local incumbent workforce, but also developing new high-value jobs. Retaining a research development and demonstration function, and then increasing the scale of those trials and trying to get more demand in the area, but also complementing that with some green hydrogen production at scale. So we're hopefully looking at multiple tens of megawatt scale green hydrogen production in the area, feeding testbed sites. So this is where we have specific locations like a marine port or an airport, where we try and condense activity and make sure that there's multiple modes of transport operating in that area and trying to test the viability of these ecosystems. So that's a very brief kind of, in a nutshell, look at what we're trying to achieve with the Tees Valley Hub. And I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are and welcome questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's it's very interesting to see the action and clearly, I mean, focused on centering applications again around a center to get that economy scale. I'll be interested to ask you some questions about governance of that, what's the role of government and so on. So look forward to that. Next we have up Adele Lidderdale, and Adele is a hydrogen project officer for the Orkney Islands Council. And we've heard a lot of news releases and articles coming out about the work going on in the Orkney Islands. And so I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about how you're tackling it in maybe a more small community and a remote community. So thanks. Over to you, Adele.
Yep, great. Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. And yeah, my name's Adele. I'm the Climate Change Projects Officer, and I previously had the joy of being the project manager for a number of the kind of high-profile hydrogen projects that we have here. And really the initial driver for our projects was this, there was a real community need. So we'll discuss that here. So I always like to just start with a view of where Orkney is. So here we are, 59 degrees north, basically tiny island in the middle of nowhere. And then kind of blowing that up into the context here with the UK. I'd like to show this map because it shows our electricity grid connection on that little blow up there. So this really is the key to the kind of initiation of our hydrogen journey in Orkney. So we have one grid operator, so we're basically at the whim of the grid operator. In 2012, we had a complete moratorium of new renewable developments connecting onto our grid. This grid that you can see in the map there is split into different zones, and we trialled one of the first active network management schemes in the UK, allowing us to onboard some more renewables. So renewables in Orkney have been done mainly on an ad hoc basis. We have quite a high proportion of land ownership, from agricultural holdings to, people have access to open space here. So what actually caused the kind of moratorium on new connections was multiple small scale, so sub 4 kilowatt turbines, but just many of them, hundreds of them. So not maybe what you would imagine. And then also just to state that, we're not just one island. As you can see, this kind of, I suppose, looks like neighborhoods in a kind of more urbanized map. But instead of roads and green spaces, we're separated by the sea. And yeah, just highlighting some of the islands here where the projects actually took place. So this is the Big Hit project. So it was the second kind of high profile project, the first being Surf and Turf, which focused on that northerly island of Edie. Key drivers, I suppose, there was a curtailed community wind turbine. So those turbines tend to be 900 kilowatts, a kind of equitable community distribution of funds and not energy, but funds, just the way that the network works in the UK. We also had EMEX tidal test site. So there was already a substation close to the community wind turbine there. So that kind of added up to, why don't we trial a hydrogen production site? There's since been 2 additional electrolyzers there on ED in subsequent projects, which I'll show you in the next slide. And then very quickly in the same year, Big Hit, which was the first EU Hydrogen Valleys project, added a second site, a larger electrolyzer, and started to develop additional demand uses. So we have developed supply and demand in a very closed loop ecosystem. We already have kind of natural clustering just because of our natural geography, I suppose. And we do have active populations on each of those islands as well. One of the main barriers has been carriage on hydrogen at sea. So you can see the islands of Shappensea and Edie there, 300 and 100 people populations. The ferries that service those islands are not the same class. So everything we did to demonstrate safety on one boat, we had to do it on the other boat as well. And then we have most of our population there on the mainland that you can see at the bottom. And that's where we host our hydrogen refueling station. We have a 75 kilowatt fuel cell, which services ferries when they're dockside. So ferries still require, power when they're not steaming at sea. And then the council, the local authority that I work for, we own 5 hydrogen vans. So they're hydrogen and electric there. And we were the first customer to purchase hydrogen. So starting to support with that kind of, more economically viable model. So really our market conditions, our barriers, our drivers, they happen much earlier than I suppose what we're experiencing in the rest of the UK. So hopefully we'll touch on that in the panel discussion. But hydrogen quickly became, like a grid balancing. The grid balancing potential became very clear early on. The way we have sort of driven these projects forward is that we have done fairly detailed assessment of our energy usage throughout the islands of Orkney. We have fully decarbonised electricity. You can see that small box there in red. So we generate around 130% of our localised use of electricity, not energy, fully from renewable developments. And now we're starting to target transport, heavy ferries as our main user. So you can see there, we're still heavily reliant on fossil fuels. So despite generating so much green hydrogen, so much renewables, we're still heavily reliant on imported fossil fuel for other uses there. So just gives us a scope and an idea of where we kind of place ourselves moving forwards. And I think it's just nice to see this is just a 5-year timeline of how quickly the project snowballed from those original concepts. So we added additional maritime applications. We have tested various technologies. So we use fuel cell versus internal combustion engine to propel vessels, a training suite required. We've shaken a few legislative and regulatory barriers, as I discussed, from the logistics of hydrogen. We're not on the gas grid, so we had to really upskill people for gas handling, and the project's just kind of increased in ambition. The high flyer project's important to note, so we haven't really touched on this yet. We have got a fuel that we use for some of our smaller passenger planes. It's going to become, we're not going to be able to source that anymore. So there's this kind of really kind of near-term need to replace some of these fossil fuels. And I think, we can discuss that again. As well as the project development, we've kind of developed a suite of local policies, the hydrogen strategy, electric vehicle strategy, sustainable energy strategies, and it really just helps us kind of bolster this need, keeps that kind of pressure there to keep the project rolling, and it helps with that kind of global outreach, but also the community outreach back as well. And then most recently, last week, there was an announcement for the Flotter Green Hydrogen Hub, and that's looking at repurposing oil and gas infrastructure, linking it in with offshore wind farm projects, looking at export markets for green hydrogen throughout the rest of the UK and the global market as well. So that's our first kind of much more significant scale of project, and again looking at those just transitionary principles, reskilling oil and gas workers, reskilling kind of oil and gas assets as well, and yeah, just to share some of those learning points that we've had from the various projects over time. It has not been easy, but it's definitely been fun, and yeah, it's great to continue to work there. But identifying the issues, I think we kind of discussed on that in the first session. What is it in your area that you're trying to address? Is there a market need? Is there something else there that you're able to address? We're a rural area. We tend to be the last to receive new technologies if we don't make them for ourselves. So we're very keen to kind of get on with doing that part. Really identifying the stakeholders, including the community. So I think Simone mentioned that earlier on. There's they can be really helpful to projects with local knowledge, but also not derailing projects as well if there's some resistance to these projects. Keeping a look on the audit. So we've done 2 of those energy assessments. So we're able to see, where if we've made indents, where we're going to direct our kind of strategies moving forward. And then, yeah, just pragmatically approaching barriers as well. We come up with so many legislative kind of loopholes, lack of standards, new use of hydrogen. Our road infrastructure is very different on the islands. We have ferries, buses, planes, trains, cars, all those types of things. So each one of those has got a different regulatory barrier, different regulatory framework, different kind of interest groups, different, boards that kind of govern those issues. So, we have to take them one at a time, and you can't necessarily, move one from the other technology. So that's it. The project kicked off at a time where I really feel that the international kind of scope was ready to hear the solutions. You can go too soon. I think we've learned that with the kind of marine side of renewables in Orkney. It has to be at the right time. So we really hit that at the right time. And yeah, just continuing to communicate the benefits, both to the area and to the wider kind of renewable world as well. So yeah, a really quick whistle-top tour. It's just so much information to cram into a short time, so hopefully we'll pick up additional questions, and yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Adele. Really appreciate that. A great overview of what's going on there, and very exciting, and quite a different perspective in terms of coming from a community that has a renewable energy resource and how to make the best advantage of it to solve your problems. It's coming in from a different angle, and I'm excited to see that. Next, we have up Amr Ghaffar, who's the director of the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre and the Greater Manchester Low Carbon Hydrogen Hub, and I'll turn it over to Amr.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give a completely different spectrum to how we've developed our hub journey. So I'm here with multiple hats on here today. So I'm the director of the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre, and we support multiple hydrogen and fuel cell projects across our region. Now, Manchester's a very built up environment, a very busy city region. We have a 2038 ambition to be net zero carbon. And we started our hydrogen journey back in 2012 when we launched a public-private partnership called the Greater Manchester Hydrogen Partnership, which effectively helped us pave the way to create a fuel cell and hydrogen research centre. So what we do at the core of our centre is we research and diagnose electrolyzers and fuel cells at different modes of operation. We look at new and assess new materials for electrolyzers and fuel cells, and we basically work and support over 120 businesses currently, predominantly small to medium-sized enterprises that are looking at the hydrogen fuel cell supply chain and value chain to see where do they actually effectively fit in within that. We've also supported the city region since that date back in then, but it's only in September of this year we've had a Greater Manchester Hydrogen Fuel Cell Strategy approved. But we effectively built up from a point of creating an interest in hydrogen fuel cells for a built-up city environment to actually now having a recognised strategy which is supporting our new hydrogen hub project, which is based at Trafford Park. But I think the way we've evolved is we've built up around our research and innovation assets. We've built up around our strengths of companies in the region, and then we've supported it through the educational establishments of the region. So we have ourselves, University of Manchester, and other universities that are very focused on materials and other aspects. We've developed programs for hydrogen education, and we launched one of Europe's first targeted programs of hydrogen education called High Schools, and that is teaching hundreds of maybe thousands of students on a weekly basis across 6 or 7 different countries at the moment around 11 different topics of the hydrogen aspects. We've also fully involved with our industrial cluster in the Northwest. So that's through Net Zero Northwest, and it was yesterday that it was announced that they're in track 1, and looks like the HyNet project is going to be fully supported as one of the first industrial clusters to be supported. So in terms of where we're effectively trying to sort of develop our journey, it was in 2020 we held every year we have a Greater Manchester Green Summit. So that's where the hydrogen strategy was really launched as a report. So we wrote that report on behalf of the city region, and it basically set out to inform how hydrogen fuel cells can support Greater Manchester in that ambition of 2038 to decarbonise all of those sectors. And we highlighted the activities and policies that the Northern Powerhouse was effectively taking on board for the uptake of hydrogen technology. So we assessed different technologies. A number of short-term recommendations were made to our city region, and that was basically to see how could we make use of hydrogen and make hydrogen a reality within our city region, and especially within our economy. So we recognise, as other colleagues have said, that there is now a UK hydrogen strategy which is set out to support 9,000 jobs and a lot billions in investment. Our strategy that we've delivered for Greater Manchester focuses in basically 3 delivery phases. So between 2021 and 2025, we're looking at establishing a transport supply chain and building that confidence in wider hydrogen. Between 2026 and 2030, we're looking at large volume hydrogen supply, and 2028 to 2038, we're going to increase the amount of CO2-free hydrogen that we have within our region. So we recognise within a built-up environment like Manchester that the majority for hydrogen fuel cell development in terms of projects has taken place outside of Greater Manchester. So if we look at Hy4Heat, HyNet, Northwest, with the exception of the fuel cell centre, that we very much focused on the R&D, but we were mindful that all of those businesses we were supporting were asking, when is Greater Manchester going to start looking at hydrogen fuel cell technology? So we needed a strategy to be adopted, and that strategy, I'm very pleased to say that as it's been formally adopted, it's led to an agreement of an MOU between some key organisations. So the main developer leading the Trafford Energy Hub is Carlton Power, but we have an agreement with Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Trafford Council, Electricity Northwest, Cadent Gas, and Manchester Metropolitan University to explore that development. I'm very pleased to say that that project now, from an MOU, has gone into planning, and it's to install a large, I think in first phase, around 20 megawatt electrolyzer with a view to building up to a 200 megawatt green electrolyzer, alongside some other technologies that are already installed at this site in Trafford. There's already a large, I think the world's largest cryo battery facility will be there, and that's a 10 megawatt facility. It's going to, the hydrogen that we're looking to produce will be powered by local solar and northwest wind farms. And we're trying to sort of develop a really multi-energy vector site, which will support that phase one of our suggestion within that hydrogen strategy. So in terms of where we go next with that project, it's really to sort of look at what is the Trafford hydrogen opportunity. It's now providing that investment decision for both Carlton and for multiple users across the city, that as we go towards our 2030 ambitions, we are going through opportunities for our bus reform. Our mayor wants to take control back of our buses and found a London style model of buses. So there's a huge opportunity for hydrogen buses there. There are groups of organizations from both the private and public sector that are now pulling together and providing support for that user demand. So I think where we really need to focus is, this is using existing technology. So, you know, it's water to hydrogen electrolysis using that proven modular technology. The renewable energy was supplied by either that PV that is already going to be located on that site, or by private wires, or a sleeved off power purchase agreement. I think for us, it was very sort of key to understand, what does that user demand piece look like? So we are pooling together a number of different organisations, from Transport for Greater Manchester, from the airport, through to the police, through to the emergency services, to see what does that hydrogen demand piece look like. And I think one of the colleagues earlier on the call saying, you know, linking it a hub where you have this large facility which is going to supply hydrogen. We have a research centre that focuses down through the technology readiness levels. Currently, we're looking at technology readiness levels by the business we're supporting up to 1 to between 4. But as that hub evolves, our ambition will evolve. So we will be supporting businesses through technology readiness levels, probably 5 up to through to 8 and 9, to really get their products to market, because the businesses we are supporting, both large and small businesses, are looking for that supply chain opportunity. They're also looking for that opportunity that they can use hydrogen at scale. And I think that's where our hub is probably different in a city centre environment, in the fact that, yes, it is, Trafford was probably the only location it could probably go, because it's probably one of our most industrial areas. The planning application we expect to gain feedback on Q4 2021. I think where we go from there is, the ambition is to have hydrogen, the construction to commence in Q1 2022, with first hydrogen being produced at site by Q4 2023. If our user demand piece works and the project economics all keep working the way they are, then I would see that site being developed out into a large R&D facility, which has the opportunity to provide hydrogen at scale, both for transport and heating. And I think that's pretty much where I want to sort of talk about today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Emma. That's really interesting to hear. As I'm understanding it, it sounds like you had a center of expertise in the city. You wanted to get those transportation applications underway into town, but you have this issue around, well, how do you get the hydrogen to make sure the economics work out? And you're now working to pull those two parts together, and overall, what Dr. Layzell would call a transition plan, or a foundation plan, pardon me, in place to see how things are moving forward. So very interesting to see how you've been advancing things there. Next up, we have John Maddie, the director of the University of South Wales Hydrogen Centre in the South Wales Industrial Cluster. I look forward to hearing from John.
Thanks, Mark, and hopefully everyone can see my screen and hear me well. Yeah, so as you say, I'm the director of the University of South Wales Hydrogen Centre, and also the academic lead for the South Wales Industrial Cluster. So my perspective on this is going to be about what we're doing, and the phrase was used earlier, I think it was Mike that said, you know, building a coalition of the willing. I'll sort of try and talk through what we've done to build a coalition of the willing of industrial partners in South Wales. So just to a little bit about the research group that I work in and lead at the Hydrogen Research Centre. We're focused on all aspects of hydrogen, and we've had a long history looking at that over several decades. A team that's built from biologists, chemists, physicists, and plenty of engineers, and myself included amongst those. And we focus on production, storage, and application of hydrogen, and across the board. But our focus is really on working on applied R&D with particularly with industrial partners, as well as other academics, but clearly with plenty of industrial partners. But we also have some areas of fundamental research that we conduct, particularly on things like hydrogen storage and similar technologies. We've got two separate facilities, lab facilities at Glentough and the hydrogen centre that I run in Port Talbot. And our production focus is on all types of electrolysis, and we've got experience in all of those areas, particularly alkaline, PEM, but also now looking at solid oxide electrolysis. We have a lot of work on biological and thermochemical production routes. My background was in the industrial gases industry and sort of traditional grey production of hydrogen, but we're modifying that to look at ways in which we might even achieve carbon negative hydrogen production methods. And we also do a lot of work on hydrogen recovery. On storage, we've got plenty of work, and colleagues in Hydro-Quebec will attest to some of the work that we do on novel materials for hydrogen storage. And also we work on the area of hydrogen for energy storage. And then on application, we installed Wales' first hydrogen refueling station in 2009, which is still in operation. And we've worked with vehicle manufacturers on elements of vehicle drivetrain, hydrogen handling on board vehicles. We've got a lot of work on fuel cells of all types, but particularly in PEM, SOFC, and also microbial fuel cells as well. And then we do a lot of work on application of hydrogen for fuel and feed switching with industry partners. Okay, so just to give the context for industrial clustering in the UK, as part of the industrial strategy and the industrial decarbonisation challenge, the key emitting areas in the UK have effectively started to mobilise, and we're no different in South Wales. Just looking at the map on the right hand side there, South Wales is effectively the second largest industrial emitter of CO2 in the UK. But if you combine power with that industrial output, then our emissions equate to around about 16 million tonnes a year of CO2. So what have we done? We've pulled together this coalition of the willing, and effectively that's over 40 of the largest energy users and emitters, as well as support activity from councils and government, and then academics like myself to assist in pulling together our plan to decarbonise and the role that hydrogen will play within that. We're engaged in two major projects at the moment: a cluster plan project and a deployment project, which I'll describe, and then also some other specific decarbonisation projects that look at different aspects, including hydrogen, as well as things like heat recovery and the like. So just in terms of the cluster plan, what we're looking to do here is, and it buys into the arguments that have been put forward by many of the other speakers, the idea that you have this hub arrangement, and in this case, with a large industrial site, that then gives rise to opportunities for a local hub, whether that's local, domestic, commercial or industrial heat, but also potentially the use of the hydrogen that may well be generated on that site or imported to that site. And then broader, that links to a mini cluster idea, and that can include the development of renewables, whether that's onshore PV or wind, particularly offshore wind that we're looking at as well, development of electrolyzers at scale, embodiment of smart network principles, and then we also have within each of the sort of South Wales mini clusters then power generation, existing gas turbine power generation, but then looking to convert that to partial and then eventually to full hydrogen use within the gas turbines. And then within the broader industry sector, the ability to both offtake co-produced hydrogen. Some of those routes were mentioned earlier, but I'm looking particularly at hydrogen from steelmaking processes and the like, and then that linked with carbon capture and use and carbon capture and storage, and then clearly the spillover of that industrial hydrogen to transport as well. So the key is that hydrogen plays a key role at all levels. And then just some specifics then in terms of what's planned within our deployment project. The economy of South Wales is much more industrial than is generally the case in the UK. And included in that, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the left-hand side here, the Port of Milford Haven currently imports around about a third of the UK's gas requirements, natural gas requirements, but has deep water ports, has a petrochemical industry surrounding that. As you come eastwards to Port Talbot, there's major steelmaking facilities, but also deep water port. And then around, Barry, large conglomeration of chemical works. Cardiff, again, metals industries. And then in Newport, there's metals and chemicals as well. And then smaller ports dotted along the coast as well. So in terms of the deployment project, effectively what we're looking at is major petrochem decarbonisation through, particularly through adoption of green hydrogen in that respect. In the power sector, looking at using hydrogen to displace natural gas as part of that power generation in gas turbine production. And then in steel making, initially looking at hydrogen offtake from existing steel making, but then making a transition path towards using hydrogen as the reductant for primary iron making and then steel making. And then the same within industries like cement making and the glass industry and others. So within the cluster as a whole, all of those sectors are represented, including things also like paper and a whole series of other industries as well. But the idea being that, and I have to stress here, that the whole of the south of the UK doesn't have easy access to geological CO2 storage. So as a result, the plan within South Wales, both from existing CO2 emissions, is to capture and to ship that, to other parts of the UK. Particularly in the northwest or northeast of the country, there are potential sources, geological sources for CO2 storage. But it also gives rise to two main factors. One is an impetus for us to explore green hydrogen, probably more than we would if we had geological CO2 available, and also to explore carbon capture and use. And so some of the work that we're doing with industrial partners is looking at various ways of creating either fuels, so aviation fuels and the like from captured carbon, but I accept that all that does is sort of displacing CO2, but also then looking at platform chemical usage or platform chemical production from captured CO2 and captured hydrogen in that respect. So effectively a broad program of activities across a whole series of sectors. And just to put some numbers to that, effectively, if all of the projects that we're currently looking at within this deployment project come about, that's £3.5 billion worth of investment to the South Wales region alone. Where are we currently? Well, South Wales has a whole series of hydrogen production facilities dotted around, and it goes hand in glove with a lot of that industrial activity that I've mentioned already. So again, from the west, we've got hydrogen production within the Valera's Pembroke oil refinery. We've got hydrogen production for nickel refining in just north of Swansea. We've got hydrogen production for export, but also for steel, particularly steel finishing in Port Talbot. Then we've got hydrogen for the chemical industry in and around Barry. And then further east, we've got hydrogen for both steel making, or particularly steel finishing, and also for chemical production. So all of the blue dots here should actually be grey. That's all grey hydrogen currently, but it does give the opportunity to look at capture, and as we develop new carbon capture, then potentially those grey hydrogen facilities can be converted to blue. But we've also got, and my own facility has long looked at electrolytic hydrogen production, but also biological hydrogen production. And also our colleagues at Swansea University have got electrolytic hydrogen production in a project that they're working on with Hanson Cement. So the sum of this is that there's a lot of existing capacity and there's a lot of expertise across various sectors in the hydrogen field in the area. I just wanted to say one more thing, and this is sort of a late addition slide. Yesterday, and again, just to show another sector where we were looking at hydrogen in this respect, the Budweiser Brewing Group and Protium, who are a green hydrogen company, announced yesterday that they're looking to change the fuel supply to that site via application of green hydrogen, and that's a 20 megawatt project. So that'll be developed over the next few years, but I think it's quite exciting to show that, you know, these projects are coming about, they're starting to happen, and as I say, that's hot off the press. So that's it from me, just a flavour of activity in South Wales, very heavy industrial flavour to that, but you can see that it touches on and is very similar to a lot of the things that previous speakers have said, both in the UK and in different parts of Canada as well.
Thanks very much, Sean. That's certainly an impressive amount of projects that are being considered in South Wales, and a massive investment. And I'll say that, you know, that shows the economic opportunity. And I'll point out to my member companies that they're going to need a lot of hydrogen technology. They're going to need a lot of carbon capture management technology. They're going to need a lot of applications, fuel cell technologies, and so there's a real opportunity for collaboration between our countries in terms of you know, how do we develop those international supply chains? How do we take advantage of that economic opportunity and promote trade between the countries in that area? So hope that some of my members will be reaching out to yourself and to others to make those connections. Last but not least, we have Philip Bell, who will be talking on behalf of the Aberdeen City Council Hydrogen and is the Aberdeen City Council Hydrogen Champion. Please go ahead, Phil.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Mark. Yes, my name is Philip Bell, and I'm unlike some of the panelists, I'm a chartered engineer, but I'm also an elected member of Aberdeen City Council. So I became an elected member in 2017, and I was asked if I would become if I'd be involved with hydrogen, which has been going on since 2014 in Aberdeen, and I said yes, I would like to do that. So why hydrogen in Aberdeen? So can we go to the first slide, please? To the next slide. Yeah, great. So a long story, I've only got 6 minutes, but the story started in 2014, which is really when Aberdeen was arguably catapulted into becoming into becoming the UK's leading hydrogen city. Adele might not think that's the case, but we feel that we are. We're putting hydrogen at the heart of our energy transition by investing in innovative technologies and successfully demonstrating how hydrogen can create jobs and power our local economy. Aberdeen's existing cluster of assets and capabilities make the city the natural choice to spearhead the UK's transition to net zero. Aberdeen is strategically and geographically best placed to catalyse national and international energy transition through its extensive supply chain capabilities in oil and gas, offshore wind energy, hydrogen production and fuel cell deployment, gas and hydrogen distribution, carbon capture, utilisation and storage being deployed just 30 miles north of here at St Fergus. Aberdeen is already a world-class destination for inward investment in alternative energy, innovation and commercialisation, underpinned by our reputation as the home of international energy research institutions, regulatory authorities, commercial operators and new energy assets. And this also includes the development of the new energy transition zone next door to our new Deepwater South Harbour, all supported by an extraordinary ecosystem of specialist supply chain organisations that will collectively underpin the contribution of the city to the new global energy future. Energy transition is happening here in Aberdeen, bringing together the transferable skills and expertise from the oil and gas sector with the exceptional capacity of renewable energy sources the northeast of Scotland has. The city is at the forefront of hydrogen technology adoption and leading the transition to a low carbon economy. And I'm sure you're all sitting on the edge of your seats. Could we go to the next slide, please? So that's, yeah, thank you. Aberdeen published the Hydrogen Strategy and Action Plan in 2015 to develop a world-leading hydrogen economy in the city region. The strategy has 7 objectives. Produce hydrogen from renewable sources, use hydrogen for non-transport applications. For instance, at our new exhibition and conference centre, which you see centre of the slide, that's powered by 3 solid oxide fuel cell hydrogen cells, which is the largest hydrogen fuel cell deployment in the UK, and they produce between them 1.2 megawatts of electricity, 1.3 megawatts of heat. Develop the supply chain, and also training in Aberdeen. There's 2 universities and also a technical college. Improve hydrogen perception through an education and communication program. Influence policy and regulation to influence and encourage hydrogen adoption. Develop refueling infrastructure. And finally, to increase the number of hydrogen vehicles. The hydrogen strategy has led to Aberdeen participating in various hydrogen projects to stimulate demand, raise awareness, influence policy, deliver hydrogen infrastructure, and deploy hydrogen vehicles. Could we have the next slide, please? Thanks. Aberdeen City Council has been recognised for its achievements so far in hydrogen, including a range of awards and world firsts, including one of the largest and most varied fleets of hydrogen vehicles being trialled in Europe. We have deployed over 85 vehicles in Aberdeen over the past 8 years, and we have another 10 buses and 6 cargo pedelecs. And a pedelec, if you don't know it, is a hydrogen-assisted cargo bicycle arriving next year. We can also lay claim to a number of world and UK firsts. We were the first in the world to adopt hydrogen cars in our car club fleet. We were the first in the world with hydrogen double-decker buses, and there's 15 of them. We were the first in the UK to trial a hybrid hydrogen diesel road sweeper. We are shortly to receive the UK's first fuel cell electric waste truck to work alongside our existing fuel cell hydrogen diesel waste truck. All of this means we have quite a lot of experience and knowledge of hydrogen deployments. Could we have the next slide, please? Aberdeen has 2 publicly available hydrogen refueling stations, and until last year, they were the only two in Scotland. Kitty Brewster was built in 2015, and the second station, the Aberdeen City Hydrogen Energy Storage Facility, or HES, in Cove in 2017. Both refueling stations use electrolysis to produce green hydrogen on site and provide fast refueling of buses and heavy vehicles. So buses and heavy vehicles have hydrogen supplied at 350 bar, that's 5,000 psi, and the cars and vans have it supplied at 700 bar, that's 10,000 psi. And both supplies are chilled to -40 degrees C to give the fast refueling. Our hydrogen-fueled vehicles do not generate any carbon emissions, and the process of making green hydrogen doesn't generate any carbon emissions either. Could we have the last slide, the next slide, please? Sorry. Thank you. The Hydrogen Hub. It's a first commercialization joint venture for hydrogen, and we feel it is happening very soon. So that's targeted for 2024. The reality now is that Aberdeen will run out of hydrogen within the next couple of years, and that's solely attributable to the increasing hydrogen demand profile that we've worked hard to develop. There's an opportunity to promote energy transition as part of the wider Scottish Government carbon reduction targets, and that's why we proposed the Aberdeen Hydrogen Hub. The key aim of the hub is to achieve a cost-effective supply of green hydrogen, which will be on a par with diesel and petrol. We'll make it available on a commercial basis to the market to support existing and proposed hydrogen projects. The first phase will serve our transport requirements for buses and council fleet using renewable energy to produce hydrogen at scale. The first phase will serve our transport requirements for buses and council fleet using renewable energy to produce hydrogen at scale. The second phase will scale up hydrogen supply for use for trucks, rail and maritime applications. And the final phase will look at how we might use hydrogen in our 5 existing heat networks and also in industry such as distilleries. We are also contemplating looking at exporting hydrogen. In June of this year, we released a tender seeking a strategic partner to deliver the Aberdeen Hydrogen Hub. We're currently in the final stages of this process, and we are very much looking forward to the announcement of our preferred bidder next week, just in time for COP26. So that will be one of the announcements made for COP26. Thanks very much, and that was a whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much, Philip. Really appreciate the update on what's going on in Aberdeen. And again, citing lots of opportunities. I'd like everybody to join now if they would. And I would like to pose some questions here. We have very limited time left, but I'm really interested. I mean, I'm going to take as a given now. Everybody's pointed out the fact that we've got hydrogen and it can play a huge role in decarbonizing our economy, that we need to roll it out. We need to get it going. Yep. I would take it as a given now from what I'm hearing that clustering into a hub has benefits. It allows you to get that scale and to share your resources. Again, a given. What I am not clear on, and I also will take as a given that every location is going to have differences in hydrogen supply, differences in applications, differences in opportunities. What I ask now is, what do you do to pull that all together? Particularly talking about governance. You know, obviously these are plans, they're fairly major plans, there's money being deployed. Is there a governance structure in place in your locations? Is it just discussions that bring together private sectors? How are these organized and how are they managed? And because I think it's really important as we start thinking about that in getting hubs in other locations is, you know, fundamentally, what do you need to do to get things going? What do you need to do in terms of, we talked about engagement, but then how do you govern it? How do you get things actually moving forward? And I'll start in order that people spoke. I'll start with Mike.
Okay, thank you. I actually can't open my video because it's been turned off for me, but as long as you can hear me, that should be fine. So in terms of the thank you. So in terms of the Tees Valley project, we work very closely with the Tees Valley Combined Authority. So in terms of the local authority in the area, there's a combination of areas. They all come together under the TVCA, and we work closely with them to try and realise what we're trying to achieve with the hub. So they have their ambitions to decarbonise and pursue green hydrogen, and we are working closely with them to make sure that we're pulling the right levers and making sure that we're engaging with the right academic and industry partners to bring the project to fruition.
Okay, so the governments, the municipalities are the sort of the ones that are sponsoring this activity in the hub, and then you are working as the manager to help pull all that together. Is that correct?
In a way, yeah. So what we're trying to do is learn what that process is, because this is the first time in the UK that we've tried to do something like this. So what we're doing is, working with them, setting up there's a steering board as part of this where we get together and try and understand what they're trying to achieve, what we want to achieve, and trying to bring that together whilst working with partners such as Innovate UK to deliver the competition side, so the R&D aspect, but also talking to local stakeholders from, as I mentioned, industry and academia to make sure that we're getting the right consortia together and the right bids into the competitions that we put out, to make sure that we do go along the right path that suits the area, suits the existing infrastructure, what can we build upon, and that's where it's important to work with the local authority. They've obviously built up a big chemical industry in their area. We want to make sure that we're complementing that, building on that, and one of the reasons for going to the Tees Valley area is because that industrial base is so strong.
Okay, Adele.
Yeah, for us, there's, I suppose, a number of governance structures, but for the initial projects, they were very much bottom up and top down. So there's always this misnomer that it's one or the other, but it can be a combination of both. So you kind of chase project funding, but also you have identified a need in your local area. Working for a local authority, there's a stringent governance process. Everything that we do that's significant goes through the chamber in the local area, and then the projects tend to have their own kind of governance structures. We don't have any official PPPs, it's all informally managed, but I suppose we have that boundary naturally as an island that supports more autonomous kind of organisational groupings.
So you'd play a coordination role on behalf of the council, and then there's individual projects that have to get their own funding and their own management, and you just try and coordinate them through the activities of the council.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, Amr.
Thank you. Well, I think if you look at the way ours was developed, it came through the hydrogen strategy that we wrote for Greater Manchester, and that really said that we need to look at hydrogen as a potential opportunity. So that's where that MOU really was developed out from. So the MOU involved the combined authority, so definitely the City region needed to be on board with what we were saying, and that's they wouldn't have approved the strategy. If we look at the other partners to the MOU, it's Cadent Gas, you know, they're gas network operators. They're also one of the lead partners of the HyNet consortium, which is the Northwest Industrial Cluster. So they've got very focused view on hydrogen. Electricity Northwest have also written a report with Cadent and electricity and with themselves to say that electricity is not going to solve all of our problems. Hydrogen has to play a role. And then we've got we needed a developer like Carlton Power who owned a site like Trafford Park to support them with the investment opportunities. So we've been bringing forward potential investors to them, and then bringing the localized council on board as well, because it's on their patch. So they need to recognize that this is an opportunity for us to sort of really develop out this project, and then to tail all that off is help them and support them with that user demand piece.
And the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre is an independent group, or is it?
We're a university, so the reason why we're involved, because we kind of represent hydrogen for Greater Manchester, as we have done for many years, but we're interested in, because we lead multiple skills pathways for the industrial cluster, and where we as a university start looking at introducing courses around hydrogen energy, the fact that we have a research centre on hydrogen energy. So we're looking at net zero skills and seeing where does hydrogen play a role within that. But equally, we've supported over 100 odd businesses which are looking at that opportunity that this wider value chain is going to bring. So they need to be seeing projects of scale like this being developed. So they want to recognize where's the opportunity for them. So I think from a supply chain and a skills perspective, and equally the R&D perspective, that's why the university's got a clear involvement in this project.
Interesting, because the University Quebec at Trois-Rivières seems to be a similar role to what you're doing there. Mm. They have their Hydrogen Institute, and they're looking to drive things forward. John. Okay.
Yeah, governance is a vexed question with us, I'll be honest. So just to describe maybe for our Canadian colleagues, governance in the UK, Wales has a devolved administration, as does Scotland, as does Northern Ireland, and yet some powers are devolved and other powers are not. So of course some are driven by Westminster and UK government as a whole. So as a result, we have an interplay with those, but of course we're the South Wales Industrial Cluster, we're not the All Wales Industrial Cluster. So even that in itself provides some tensions with Welsh government. But on the other hand, the way that we develop the South Wales cluster, we developed later than, for example, the clustering around Teesside. There was certainly activity around Liverpool, Manchester, which was in play well before we were getting together, and not just in Orkney, but in and around Grangemouth in Scotland, there was sort of clustering activity taking place. So we came fairly late to the party, but we've effectively developed the cluster based on a handshake at this stage. We've decided not to formalize arrangements yet as the cluster. We don't have the support of local enterprise partnerships that are available in England in that sense. And that is a double-edged sword, because what it means is that we have, each of the companies has their own independent view, they're representing their company. We speak collectively, but we're a loose collaboration. As soon as we formalize, then all of a sudden we're afraid that it may well be that that it's not so easy to speak with a collective mind. We've got on the one hand steel makers, on the other hand we've got we've got power producers, on the other hand we've got refineries and chemical producers. So all of them have a different view in that respect.
Okay, and I will turn it last over to Philip. You sit on the council in Aberdeen, so presumably you have a good insight into the governance needs there.
So we have a strategic infrastructure plan, we've got Aberdeen City Regional Hydrogen Strategy. So they've both been approved by full council. And what that really means is that we have partnering agreements. So we have partnering agreements with various other groups. So there's the Robert Gordon University, who are part of the Co-Wheels Car Hire Club. There's the fire brigade. We've actually got a couple of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. The council themselves are actually driving demand. Partnering agreements also for this new hydrogen hub, which is commercialising the whole offering. Partnering agreements with Scottish Government, with the EU for funding, with Aberdeen City Council as well for funding. So there's lots of priming going on, and there's lots of outreach just to get private money invested into Aberdeen. But that's it in a nutshell.
I'm going to cut us off here because I think we've reached the end of our time limit. But thank you, gentlemen, so much for your and the lady for your assistance in this panel. Fascinating information, could go on for many hours, I'm sure, but gave us some very good insight into what's needed to what the opportunity is and how to start moving forward on a hydrogen hub. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.